Well, it looks like we are live on the YouTube Live. Welcome to the Friday Night Wild uh, comic book call that's going to go on tonight. That was real smooth there. Hope everybody's doing well, having fun. I'm Howler Mouse. You are in Mouse Manor. And ended up doing a sort of a semi spontaneous comic book call the other day in Roanoke, Virginia. Not even real sure what to call the shop. If you followed Sticky Goose drama a year ago, he was actually at that shop in Roanoke. Basically, Josh and I ended up taking off there for a little bit. We saw a 40th anniversary show, a showing of Vampire Hunter D, the original there, right? And it was fantastic to see that thing on the big screen. And then that's how we ended up going to the comic book shop that day. Only has back issues, does not buy other stuff, no new comics there or anything like that. And it was set up very nice, very nice. Okay, in my opinion, he had actually a $2 room. He had a dollar box room. He had some boxes where that's where the keys were. You had to take them up and ask them about it to see what was going on there. And I ended up getting quite a bit. We also stopped at an antique shop in Withville, right, on the way down there, and I picked up a few things there. And I got to tell you, it is getting a little frustrating. And it's just part of the game there, where I have books. Some of the books I saw in these bins and stuff, right? I've had these books since the late 70s, the 80s. I bought them off the rack. I drug them around before we you had access to bags and boards and boxes and everything. And there was just some boxes where I could have replaced big chunks of my collections from back in the day because they were in so much better shape with their creamy pages and everything, right? So anyway, again, I'm Howler Mouse. Welcome to the channel. Thumbs it up, subscribe, hit the bell, right? So you'll know when I do these spontaneous shows, when I do stuff on Sundays, when we talk comics, when I maybe draw a little bit, or I do whatever and stuff, right? So let's see if I can see the chat. Let me know if you're out there. Let me know you can hear me because I am new to the YouTube Live. We usually use StreamYard, and so far everything's looking pretty good. I'm assuming I'm heard. So hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, and we're just going to check that, and then we'll get into the comic books over here. We'll check and see how I sound live here. I'm not seeing anything on the microphone, which is weird. Howler Mouse channel. All right, you can hear me. That's awesome. We're all in this together, guys. Great. Awesome. Who is that? Ponadius. Good to see you, brother. Ponadius and I did a live stream not too long ago on the Age of Apocalypse. And I got to tell you, I had a good time doing that, and we'll be doing something in the future, I'm sure. We can hear me. Yeah, we're good. Yeah. All right. So right before we get to the comic books, I'll show you something I found out in the wild, I believe, out on eBay. This really took me back. I don't know how many of you guys remember the original Masters of the Universe figures of the 80s, right? For me, seeing some other kid when I was about 7 or 8 years old walking around with a Skeletor figure just blew me away. I had my Boba Fett figure, and then I see the Skeletor figure, then I see these Masters of the Universe figures. And so a staple of the 80s was G.I. Joe and Masters of the Universe He-Man for me, right? And this is one of two of the Rock Lords that came in. There was supposed to be something else that came with it, but I don't remember. But thanks to the Transformers and the GoBots and our little computer, our little calculator watches that also would transform and things, these things would fold down to look like meteors, or rock, if you will. So there's another one I want to get. I actually sold these years ago, somewhere in a box. I still have a bunch of them. So that's going to go up here with the Rock Lords. And I don't know if you guys know what a five and below is, but a five and below is sort of like a little novelty shop where everything's supposed to be under $5. Uh, and a lot of the stuff is just for fun. They have T-shirts, they have electronics, they have toys, vinyl toys, posters, coloring books, loads of candy, loads of Asian candy, if you will, and just it's just kind of fun when you go in. It's supposed to be a fun place where you can buy things for cheap. But you get what you pay for, okay? Because a lot of the stuff in there is cheaply made, also, right? So I rarely ever buy things like this anymore. I try not to, unlike the contrary, as you can see on these shelves. But there was no way I was going to pass up Ren and Stimpy. I call them inaction figures when they have no articulation. I got the term from some Kevin Smith Clerks toys back in the day where he called them inaction figures and always fit. But I don't know how many of you guys were around in, I believe it was 1991. I already knew who John Chris Belushi was due to Ralph Bakshi getting back on Mighty Mouse in the late 80s on CBS on Saturday mornings. For me, it was Pee Wee's Playhouse, followed by, you know, Mighty Mouse. And I have those a DVD here with all those cartoons. And then John Kay was able to sort of start this trend. I hate to call it a trend because it did last throughout the decades, but if you know how cartoons are now, that magic. But we had a creator, and it seems like it was just common sense. So he ended up bringing in Ren and Stimpy. You can actually see a cat drawn like Stimpy that's roadkill. He was run over and talking to us. He has a trademark on his back in the Mighty Mouse cartoon. But Ren and Stimpy ended up starting the creator, I guess, own creator driven cartoons on Nickelodeon, which led to Rugrats and then everything that came after it. They all sort of came out at the same time in a block, anyway, right? But this was famous because of the psychodrama that it created with Space Madness. Okay, so yeah, I have a soft spot for these guys, and I really am very picky. The John Kay episodes are really the only ones that I thoroughly enjoy. I also still watch Rocky and Bullwinkle, and some of those earlier episodes you can see the influence of older cartoons on them. And if you want a very well done and forgotten and underrated cartoon by John Kay that came out years later on Fox, check out The Ripping Friends if you have any access to that, right? So that's two things that I've gotten over the several months, just never really popped up and showed them or anything, right? So that was always fun, right? So now let's just go ahead and get to some of the comics. That's why we're here, man. Sorry there's no drama. Sorry there's no drama mining. Sorry I have nobody to attack tonight, nobody to really talk shit about. But the night is young. You never know what's going to happen, with things like that. But we'll sit down, enjoy the smell of the old comics, and remember while we read these things, right? And a lot of two of the series of comics I've gotten here, I believe they close the door, right? I'm able to finally close that door and be happy because it gives me a complete run, okay, of some of the things I'm going to show you here, right? So right before we do that here, I just kind of want to look at a few lyrics of a song here. Back in the day on this channel, I would just shoot from the hip on this, right? I think I've tried to write some notes on what to say maybe twice over the years, but I always shoot for the hip. And I would sit down here and either open or close with song lyrics. It's a song that was in my head, and it seemed to set a theme, right? It gave us a feeling. It set a theme. And I tell you what, I have a very eclectic and broad knowledge of music and lyrics and things that just fit the moment and everything like that, right? And sometimes it's on the nose, and sometimes it's just a feeling. But if you go back to the 90s, I think 96 in particular, there's a band called Primitive Radio Gods, right? They had at least one hit that I remember. It was called Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand, right? Hey, what's up, Prime One Collector? Good to see you. I would love to be able to pop you guys up. Yeah. Anyway, I can't get you on the screen, but I'm assuming we can see you down below, right? So great. Oh, I shouldn't have messed with it. All right. So anyway, the lyrics that I like of this one, of this song, and when I say hit, I don't know if it charted, but this was still where you could have some airplay on MTV back in the day when we were at the twilight of them showing videos. But anyway, the lyrics are where did it go? Yeah, yeah, it goes. Jan lays down and wrestles in her sleep. Moonlight spills on comic books and superstars and magazines. An old friend calls and tells us where to meet. Her plane takes off from Baltimore and touches down on Bourbon Street. We sit outside and argue all night long about a God we've never seen, but never fails to side with me. Sunday comes and all the papers say Ma Teresa's joined the mob and happy with her full-time job. It's kind of wild where you can have sort of vague lyrics like that and be able to connect with them. I'd say the vagueness is kind of what makes it stick and have more meaning than probably what it is. Okay. But at that melancholy mood, that's what we have tonight, stuff, right? So, in a couple months, I've pre-ordered it, and I actually this is one of the few we used to call these square bound books prestige format. There's no telling what it's actually called now over the years. Some people actually call these graphic novels, but by the time this came out in 1988, I sort of didn't track it down. This is one of the few books amongst the floppies that actually hit the stands in my town. I was surprised to see it. And this was a 4-issue miniseries. As you can see, it's called Cosmic Odyssey. Jim Starlin was still at DC, and he did this, like I said, 4-part. I think there's 44 pages in each one of these, right? And by this time, we'd already had Crisis in Legends, and I think Millennium was going on. And I kind of rolled my eyes because I was like, another crossover, you know? But this was 1988, right? Plus, we had Mike Mignola on here, right? People were starting to notice Mike Mignola. And a couple streams ago, I was talking about on Amazon Prime. I was able to watch the documentary, uh, Hellboy centric, about Mike Mignola, Nolia, um, called Drawing Monsters, and it gave like sort of a history of his time at Marvel and a little bit at DC. And he mentioned this, right? So he was able to exaggerate his art a little bit more. This was on the road to leading to the Mike Mignola that we know that did Hellboy, right? But anyway, it's real simple. Anti-life equation is involved. It's got the themes of Jim Starlin of sort of like suicide and a few things and some sci-fi mature themes at the time. And basically, what has happened is that we get a little bit of I hate to say a team, but something is going on in a plot to where there's, I believe, a couple of planets. And if one blows up, the gravitational forces will cause a collapse, in the universe there, right? Or maybe two will destroy it or something, right? So we get some random characters that made sense to Jim Starlin. And I believe this is Darkseid and Highfather. It also has a subplot of starts out with a little of an attack in the first issue from a boom tube of some hunger dogs, and one gets left behind in the sewers and is like grabbing people and eating them. Batman and a character named Bug end up kind of becoming close, and this is where we had John Stewart become a major player because he failed in letting from keeping one of the planets from blowing up. Now, why am I just showing one issue here? Because I already have all 4 issues, multiple copies of number 1, right? And strangely enough, I just have one copy of number 3, and this thing looks like it was right off of the rack. This thing looks like it's brand new. It's probably in better shape than the ones I have. So I now have 2 complete sets. Um, oh yeah, and talking about Mike Mignola mentioning this, right? Apparently, if I read into what he said for a year he was working on these New God characters of Jack Kirby. He didn't really feel like he was a Jack Kirby fan, but after spending a year studying and having these reference pieces, I guess, of Jack Kirby's New Gods and stuff, he was able to start adapting his style with exaggeration. You can actually go back in the 80s and kind of see Mike Mignola's artwork progress and stuff, right? Um, so yeah, this was the series that apparently I'm assuming he spent a year drawing all 4 issues, about 44 pages a piece in them, and it's a gradual change and stuff, right? But I mean, if you have Kirby characters, I'm going to check it out and everything, right? So I think it's like this: Orion and Superman. I absolutely love the idea of Darkseid having another Jack Kirby character, the Demon, more or less on a leash, if you will. Just some really good stuff in this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And in a couple months, there'll be a hardback coming out again. Another one. I've already seen the cover. I'm not impressed with the cover, but when it comes in, we'll talk about it. All right. Hey, what's up? Ponadias, Cosmic Odyssey is underappreciated. Yeah, I had to really warm up to it a little bit. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long, right? Oh, agreed. Cosmic Odyssey is a fantastic story, played to Mignola's strengths and the use of shadows. And we also thank you, Prime One Collector, and the esteemed Gore Vidal is here. Good evening, sir. Great to see you. Right now, keeping on with the New Gods theme here, if you will. Um, Later on, going into the 90s, into the early 2000s, late 90s, and things, they brought the New Gods back again with the series. And very niche group of people who will still follow that because they are Kirby characters and stuff, right? But John Byrne and Walt Simonson ended up sort of taking over that New Gods book. There's something else going on at the time, and they John Byrne came on. Walt Simonson was doing covers, and they New God book had reached issue 13, I believe. And in 13, 14, and 15, we had Walt Simonson doing covers and Jack Kirby taking over the book. And he was leading up to Jack Kirby's Fourth World. They ended the series and started a book that was called Jack Kirby's Fourth World. If I had the omnibus here. Yeah, hold on. Oh, it doesn't have the cover on it because I'm making my way through it. So we got the Fourth World, right? And John Byrne was able to explain a few things, just sort of have fun with the book. I think it ran 20 issues. He was doing the interiors, writing, drawing, inking, doing everything, while Simonson would come on and do covers, and John Byrne would also do covers here and there. They ended up putting in his Genesis crossover event. Turns out, because saying that all powers and all energies were related to the source by Jack Kirby, he did not want that to happen. So what I'm saying is I don't really kind of recommend this to people because it is dull and it's a lot of John Byrne doing some retro stuff with the Jack Kirby Fourth World stuff. Yes, he's answering few things, but within the plots in here, what I'm finding out, it's a slow read. Um, you know, I think Kirby is right. Byrne is definitely writing for Byrne, and Byrne thinks he's being clever. So I don't usually recommend this, right? Unless I know you're a diehard Kirby fan or a Byrne fan and stuff, right? But kind of connected to this, around 2099 or something like that, we got 25 issues of Walt Simonson getting to be Walt Simonson, right? So roughly 20 years before this, Walt Simonson, was already on the map with people with his Manhunter debut. He always kept work going after that. He actually dabbled as a penciler on Thor in the late 70s, but by the early 80s, he ended up coming on there and wrote this classic run of Thor that was just amazing. We got Beta Ray Bill and the Frog and Dark Elves and Heavy into Mythology. And with interviews that I've seen of Walt Simonson, this was stuff that he was sort of writing in his head in the 60s when he was in college or something. He was a Kirby nut to begin with. And it really blows my mind because if I have his age right, and I'm doing this by memory, he was like 27 years old before his Manhunter stuff with Denny O'Neil came out in the early 70s. So this guy's already lived some life and had these plots in his head, and we got to see it. So, of course, where we have a new god here that replaced the older gods, if you will, and stuff, we got 25 issues of him writing Orion, Darkseid's son, right? Um, and I finally got all the issues I needed to have that complete run, so now I can sit down and read it properly, right? Which really surprised me. So they're kind of backwards here. These are the issues I needed. Number 25, the last issue. Number 17, and I really enjoyed some of the books. I quit reading the Orion books because I wanted to sit down and be able to read the complete book. Number 24, where Orion got a little bit of a new look in the civilian mode. He introduced something called the father box in this. They already had the mother box. But here's one of the reasons I think some of these issues were hard to find, despite the fact they're not worth very much, right? Like I found these are like maybe $2 a piece. Is that we had Tales of the New Gods, and we had little short stories in the back of these during the first year or so, staggered in there. Art Adams did this one. Howard Chaykin, well, Howard Chaykin did another one. Who all did them? Frank Miller did one. So the back issue tales here, the extras, the story in the back were quite a bit, and they collected those. This is all hitting me at once. Here we go. And those have been collected in these backup stories. Jim Lee, Frank Miller, Steve Rude, Walt Simonson. I'm pretty sure Howard Chaykin did one. Salvi Shima might be in this. John Byrne did one. You know, so yeah, Steve Rude, John Byrne, Walt Simonson, Ron Wagner, Frank Miller, Dave Gibbons, Eric Larson, Howard Chaykin, Rob Liefeld, Art Adams, Jim Lee, Jean Paul Leon, Al Milgram, Eddie Campbell, and Steve Ditko. Now, Steve Rude one, I don't know if he actually did a backup because this reprints a Mr. Miracle one shot. It came out in the 80s. So, yeah, they might have some extras from other places, but those are also collected, right? So now you're seeing that I'm getting these complete collections for my Fourth World box, right? And that's why I'm so happy to find these. And these things are in fantastic shape. I actually got some newer books that were like total crap, like that last Sandman mini 6-issue miniseries. I took the bags from that to be able to bag these till I buy some more. Number 22, number 8, and number 20. And for some reason, I really dig this cover. I'm not sure why. It's nothing outstanding, but it's just interesting. And I feel like for some reason, I feel like there's math involved. I don't know if that makes any sense. So yeah, we have that stuff, right? So I have my Fourth World fix for a little bit, and I'm probably going to stop reading the stuff that I have been reading and just see if I can zip through this 25 issues of Orion and get it out of the way. Prime One Collector, confession time. I've never read any Kirby New Gods. You need to at least check it out. I just trying to think how you can do it cheaply. I don't think you need to dive in unless you sample it first. That's the best thing I can tell you. He actually has one design that I just can't get on board. I'm a Kirby nut, but every now and then he'll come out with a design that I can't handle. The Black Racer, flying around on skis, and dressed like a knight, red and blue colors. And I do mean like a medieval knight. I've never been able to get I've seen people do sleeker designs like in Final Crisis and things like that. Cannot do it. I wish I could show a picture of it. So, all right, going back again, a very strange thing happened. And this was like in 1985. This was like in the midst of Christ on Infinite Earth. So I'm thinking maybe this started earlier, but there's only 5 issues of this. And I used to know why this little company here went out of business. And I feel like it was a subsidiary of DC. I've got to look it up and stuff, right? But even in the letters page of this issue I'm going to show you, they announced that there was going to be some questions answered in issue 9. And there was something, I may end up blurting it out like I have Tourette's, right? There's something happened with the funding that was really bizarre, and I can't believe it's not more talk of the town there, right? Not a big deal here, but this gives me all 5 issues that were complete, right? But Wallywood's Thunder Agents through Deluxe Comics, which I suspected had something to do with DC Comics because of the talent that were on these 5 issues of the books, right? George Perez, Keith Giffen, Steve Ditko, okay, are all throughout these 5 issues. And there's 2 or 3 features in this one. This one has Dave Cockrum scripting and drawing it. I do believe there was where is it? There should be a Keith Giffen run in the middle of this also. Yeah, little pinups of characters in there. Keith Giffen coming in with Lightning being Keith Giffen. Yeah. Okay. So I think, well, let's give you time to look, right, with these Wally Wood characters. And they jumped around with who was publishing in the rights. And then, like, they would have long letters pages. So all I could figure out is if I read this correctly, like Tony Isabella is in here, some comic book people in here, random people. They're talking about the Thunder Agents and what they're doing with it. And some of these letter columns were giving Keith Giffen a hard time with his lazy new style. There's some, there's No Man. What is his name? Yeah, No Man, by Steve Ditko. You know, a little Steve Ditko story. And it blows my mind that this was going on during the crisis. This is completely on its side. And I'm really hating that I cannot remember what happened to their money, the budgeting. It was something bizarre, which is why it's sticking out of my head. Now, I could not believe I found this in the dollar box. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the significance of this, right? I actually already had this issue. And then I took it to Heroes Con years ago and had the artist Tom Rainey sign it for nothing. I mean, he was nice enough to sign it while he was sitting there drawing at Heroes Con. And then, I don't know, about 3 years ago, I was at Heroes Con. I ended up finding some issues of the Authority, Volume 2, well, not the Authority, but Storm Watch. Volume 2, that the fourth issue had Apollo and Midnighter, their first appearance. That's a big key book. But this book is where it all started with Warren Ellis. Warren Ellis came on this book, had some characters move out of the book, was able to kill even more characters with an Alien Wildcats crossover, which I am not going to pull off the shelf over here. I think I've pulled enough off, guys. But this was the start of it. And when he did this, took over Stormwatch with issue 37 and through issue 50, he actually ended up coming into the Image office. And while he was at the Image office, well, this one is probably Wildstorm offices, legend goes that he was looking around. He actually saw how poorly this title was selling. And he looked at everybody in the office and said, why are you keeping this book going? Shouldn't you cancel it with these poor sales? And they went, well, we want to know how the story ends. So Warren Ellis was like, oh my God, they're fans. And they were nice enough to keep the book going so he could finish the story. And right there, he decided to give them something that would be profitable, right? So from what I understand, they ended this. He started fresh with Stormwatch Volume 2. And then when that ended around issue 9 or 10 or something, we got Authority number 1. So this is the key book. This is a key. This is about a $40 book that I found for $1. Yeah, Stormwatch number 37 with that homage cover of Justice League by Giffen and DeMantis, the 80s and stuff, right? And I absolutely love this stuff from Ellis. The Stormwatch, the Wildcats alien that played a part into this. I don't want to say it got political, but there was some heavy stuff that kind of slowed it down a little bit and everything. And leading up to the Authority, which was some heavy stuff in places, right? So yeah, this was the beginning of that journey, right? So with James Gunn coming out with an Authority movie, yes, people should be going after Authority number 1, probably those first 12 issues, in my opinion. But you also need to back up and grab a few issues of Stormwatch Volume 1, Stormwatch Volume 2, or anything that just says Ellis. Plus, they're great reads. They really are. This is so much better than his Excalibur stuff, in my opinion. Things like that. The Image getting a hold of some of them British guys, that was a good time back then, right? So there's something I'm thinking about abandoning, and it's all right. It's all right if I do, but I will probably keep the first 100 issues as I have them in a few spots here and there. Probably get rid of a few of the story arcs and stuff. And I feel like that despite this series being the first indie book to reach 300 issues, and Dave Sim having the vision to do it, and this being quite a journey. And yes, it is an important book. It's very influential on things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, to where even this character popped up in the 8th issue and stuff, right? I I have all of the trades except for High Society, I believe, and Jocko, but I have most of the issues. But years ago, I really felt bad because I was buying some great stuff again at Heroes Con. And I'm going to guess this was 2013, if I had to pin a tail on it and kind of guess. But I ran across a box that was almost, probably starting around issue 30, a full run of Cerebus for a buck a piece. But I was buying such great stuff elsewhere. I'm like, nobody wants this Cerebus stuff. And I wished I'd gotten issue 31, 3031. First appearance of the Roach, who becomes Moon Knight Roach, Wolver Roach, Punisher Roach, and whatever the trend is, he's the ultimate satire of normal guy, the Neil Gaiman stuff, right? But I found these, some early issues of Cerebus. Now, Cerebus, the first 25 issues, was Dave Sim coming out there with an indie book, sort of doing satire and parody of Conan the Barbarian books, and some Elric in there, and Michael Moorcock, and some, a lot of fantasy stuff, right? And you could actually see him become quite the writer. You see an artist developing. And then he got the idea of 300 issues. He already plotted out when the series would end, like 2004 or something. This is in the 70s. And he got serious and took the book on a new direction with issue, I want to say 26, with High Society. And then that led to Church and State. And that led to Jocka's story, so on and so forth. And quite a journey, and he did it, right? He brought in Gerard there at some point, right? So these are early issues where it's pure Dave Sim, and we have some great stuff with Cerebus here, issue 33, 34. That's not Elric, guys, but that's a parody of Elric. He talks like Foghorn Leghorn. It's a great character. In 35, right? And in these earlier issues, he uses a lot of black before Gerard came in there to help him to do the backgrounds. Sim, the way I understand it, would probably do the figures and the writing, and Gerard would do models of streets and buildings, and then plot out rooms, make little minute dioramas of them and stuff. He really got into making sure that if it took place in a bar, he built the bar for reference, and things like that. So yeah, a lot of development. Just another place that comics were able to go, right? The Sumerian, I think they got sued by someone who thought they had rights and didn't, but then a bunch of wholesale to Kosu, and no one could carry their books. Right, right. I'm not surprised that that's what it is. I'm not going to be surprised one bit if that is 100% everything that happened. I still feel like there's a little twist in there somewhere. Come on, YouTube, work with me. My opinion about Cerebus, a masterpiece. It has chanced me every time I open a book. Right. And I'm thinking about giving up the pursuit to get these, right? I revisit the phone books. I love reading the letters columns, the editorials in the front. But I'm so close. I'm so close to having 26 to 300 that I don't know if I want to give that energy back. I left behind several of the books, probably about 20 of the books, I think, for $1 a piece. I left them behind to get the earlier issues that were $2 a piece. There's just so much to buy and so much I left behind. Cerebus is something that it has chapters I'm finding myself going back and reading and finding something new in them each time. And even the weaker stories, like Guys and Reeds and oh my goodness, not Form and Void. I guess it's the latter days, the unreadable. It's something to try to get into. I mean, it's kind of amazing to delve into a time when Dave Sims' mental illness or whatever is going on with him, and he going from an atheist to kind of building his own religion in his head. It's kind of weird. It's kind of fascinating to go out and see that come out on paper. I'm just missing the first 4 issues. That is amazing, Gore. That is fantastic. Oh wow. Oh, that's great. That's amazing. I've always been aware, in the Prime One collector, I've always been aware of Cerebus, but never read it. It's a slice of life type thing with an animal character. It's a bit more than that. There's slice of life issues. Like there's an issue where I had to put it down because I felt like I lived a part of that in there. But basically, it's the tale of Cerebus, where he becomes Pope a politician, an asshole, um, his sins, you know. It's the whole life story of one character. Dave Sim designed it to where we play many roles in life. But the amazing thing is that there's satire in it. There's characters that come in and out that you can get invested in or be glad to see that have popped up. But at the root of it, that I get out of it at times, is that Jaka, um, a human female in there who's actually the most normal character throughout it, is actually the thread of humanity that goes through it. And despite the fact that Cerebus gets married to another person and Jaka gets married to Rick, and they finally do get back together, and Cerebus screws it up and things like that. And in the midst of it, there's a prophecy that he will die alone and unloved, after he ascends and stuff, right? But there's so much more to that. I highly recommend High Society and Church and State to begin with, to see if it's your thing, because there's an Oscar Wilde character that actually becomes the focus of the book for on his own in Melmoth, you know. And I have some of these signed by Gerard and stuff like that. Okay. Prime Collector, begin with Jaka's story, an intimate book. Yeah, Jaka's story is the one that actually hooked me, the tone of the book and what it was about. Gore, I feel like we've talked about Jaka's story before or in the comments or something, but Jaka's story is the one that made me decide to get in there and really dig into this. Okay. So Jaka's story is fantastic. High Society is where the book changed and it gets a little bit political. High Society is where he's sort of like Pope over this land and things like that. But Jaka's story is the one where it feels real. It feels like these are real characters in the real world, and it's not out there being fantastic and satirous. That's the whole mood is different. Yeah. Prime Collector, I made videos years ago on my channel. Yeah, definitely check those out on Gore Vidal's channel. Absolutely. Okay. So now we're getting a little eclectic, right? I could sit here and talk Cerebus the whole time, right? I mean, we're just all hanging out here actually, I have a wintry Friday night going on here. And the wife has to get up early in the morning, thus I'm downstairs. Um, but, when you get into your comics and you read your comics, and then you see something come to fruition and you're like, you can't believe it. It's kind of hard to explain that to people. But years ago, the stepdad brought in a couple issues of Howard the Duck when Steve Gerber was writing them. Number 2 specifically, right? And I remember kind of reading those as a kid, and a lot of the stuff that Steve Gerber was satiring or, uh, you know, poking fun at or whatever, went over my little kid head. It was a duck who smoked. He had a girlfriend. He was making these weird characters. I knew some of this stuff meant more than what it was. And then, and he was talking about capitalism and some of them and being in a world that you didn't make and you didn't fit in, which we all can understand at any age. But there was this particular issue where Steve Gerber was getting behind on scripts and things. And we got this wild one-shot story where several artists came in and they did 2-page splashes telling the story. And in the midst of the story, he was talking about a writer or something, right? I would love to just pull out the book and explain it better than what I'm talking about here. But there was a showgirl from Vegas with an ostrich walking by on one of the pages or something. And Steve Gerber had somebody talking about this story of that, right? And it became sort of like an in-joke, and then it became sort of something that people actually wanted after they got over the fact that they actually put down Howard the Duck for president during an election. So he actually got votes for an election, guys. There was actually Howard the Duck for president buttons going around and things like that, right? So then I don't know. Well, let's just say for the sake of argument, it was 20 years later at Vertigo. Steve Gerber does the story of the Vegas showgirl and the ostrich in a 6-issue miniseries called Nevada. so I had issue 1 and 6. I've had them for several years, kind of flipped through them. Okay, it's Steve Gerber. So now I have issue 2. I'm only missing 1 issue now, guys. 2. I'm missing it. There's number 5, so it's number 4 I'm missing. And this cover, if there's anything that could just fit on a classic heavy metal magazine cover, this it would have been this cover. That's why I'm digging these covers, man. This is fan, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. There's number 6, of course, the last issue. She's riding the ostrich with her flaming sword. And here's like number 3. Yeah, they're a little bit out of order here. Very Devo like. I mean, I get that she's getting her hair styled and it's a hair dryer, but there we go. Almost looks like a Brian Boland cover, but it is not, right? Actually, when you look closer at it, she's not in a hair salon. It looks like she's at in France where somebody's about to get guillotined. Very cool. So I'm going to go ahead and read these, even though I do not have issue 4, right? And these are going to go in not a DC box of my comics or a Vertigo box or however I have these things going. This is going straight into the Howard the Duck box that I have, okay, of that Howard the Duck series of the 70s, if you will, right? Very eclectic, I know, and like that's what I'm trying to tell you. Once you read a lot of comics and you hear a book like this. The last time I remember wanting to get something, I ended up getting them, is that it turns out if you Craven's Last Hunt by Spider-Man, you may already know this, who knows, but it turns out that that was actually a rejected Batman story with the Joker. And so when DC turned down James DeMantis to tell the story of Joker going sane, he went over there and he switched it around somehow because I'll tell you why I say somehow. And we got Craven's Last Hunt. Well, years later, in Tales of the Dark Knight, in the anthology series, where different creators come in and they can do a one-shot story, a two-part story, a three-part story, or whatever. He actually got with, I believe it was Joe Staton. Don't hold me to it. And we have a Joker story with Batman, and it's called Going Sane. We got the original story, and I'm reading this, and I'm sitting here like, how in the hell did this turn into Craven's Last Hunt? So that's what I'm trying to tell you. When you dig into this stuff and you start hearing the stories about it, where some of these stories came from, you become a collector in my eyes. You're really delving in there a little bit. Okay, Gerber's Omega the Unknowns. Charlton 66 and I are huge fans of that, Victor Shade. Actually, it's on my, I can pull it out here, I bet. Oh, it should be like right in here, and I think I have all the single issues. Gerber's Omega the Unknown grabbed me from the beginning, not so much for the story as the potential. Loved his work, but the book was canceled and the character ruined. Especially, who was it? David Allen Kraft? I think a guy named David Kraft or something finished the story in Defenders. What I liked about Steve Gerber, especially in this with the stuff I got to read as a kid in the 70s when I got older, and went back and read it and found more of it. He did Mind Trips. Stepdad had Man Thing and a lot of Howard the Ducks and the stuff in there, Guardians of the Galaxy that he did. I got to dabble in a lot of that stuff, but it seemed like he hated New York. If you read Omega the Unknown, and one issue, there's this one issue, the Guardians of the Galaxy he did, where it's asylum world and the all the crazy aliens, mentally ill aliens, built an Earth that looked exactly like 70s New York and stuff like that. So yeah. Tim, today I found Phantom Zone by Gerber and Colin. First issue was missing, but I got 2 to 4. Have you read it? Yeah, I read it when it came out. I still have 2, 3. I still have 2 or 3 of the original issues that Stepdad had, and I have them now. And I have it in trade over there. The last part of that story is in the last issue of DC Comics Presents, number 96 or something. It's sort of a sequel. You don't really need it. I'll be interested in what you think. You do need to know a little bit about Silver Age characters to get that, but it's all there. It's all there. It was some of Gene Colan's more striking work, in my opinion. Yeah, but I enjoyed it, but I'm very biased. I read it when I was like 8 years old. I think I think 8 or 9. Victor Shade, I will look for that Nevada series. As I always do, I always say get it cheap if you want to check it out. I have no idea if it's going to be good, but I need to know. You know what I mean? I think I went through why I need to know. Oh, there we go. The Sumerian, Bolero the Ostrich. Great. I think it was Steve Grant that was ordered to close out the Omega story. Thank you, guys. I wonder why I've got David Kraft in my head for some reason. Victor Shade, Kraft had a nice run on Defenders after Gerber Scorpio storyline. That may be why. If he worked on the Defenders, yeah. Gore Vidal, thanks. Yeah, Gore. Like I said, I enjoyed it, but I have low expectations. That's what I think. You know, it was such a different. Gene Colan's artwork was such a different take of like Don Heck and Justice League that it just sort of fascinated me. You know. Now these books I got at an antique shop, right, and one or two of them I kind of laugh about because of the speculation going on out there, right? So I've talked many times back in the day, mid 80s to the early 90s there. My brother didn't live with us. He lived with his grandparents. He would come down about twice a month or so. And he's 4 years younger than I. And when he would get there, one of the first things I would do is I would walk him over to the Magic Mart in the Scotty's Pharmacy. He would buy some books. I would buy some books. We wouldn't get the same books so that we could sit in my room. I'd be on my bed. He'd be in my beanbag that was in my room, and we would spend an afternoon reading comics and stuff and switching them back and forth. And it was just amazing how I'm still amazed to this day how the youth, like, where he was 4 years younger than I, he had his finger on the pulse of the future. Hawk and Dove with Rob Liefeld, he was a fan. He had the first Cable. We both ended up having the first appearance of Deadpool, and I had no problem getting rid of my mind because it is a horrible comic, even though it's a key book and stuff, in my opinion, right? But he was there. He was there with the Rob Liefeld. I mean, it was just amazing, right? And I think he is the one that turned me on to Nth Man, right? I had all the issues to this, but in one of my 2 or 3 purges over the years, when I was able to unload it, I was able to unload it. And now, thanks to the new Fantastic Four movie of 2025 coming out, not only have they announced in an article the oh god, what was her name? The Kirby girl that's playing Invisible Woman slash girl. She announced that we'll be playing with gender politics. But before that, another red flag about this movie is that Silver Surfer will be female. So people automatically started jumping on this a few months ago, saying that this was the first appearance of a female Silver Surfer. Then they moved to, I think it was Earth X or Universe X, where it's on the cover. It was Shalabal on the cover with Norn Rad. You know what I mean? So I kind of laugh when these key books come out of obscure things that we don't even know, that people are just grasping at straws to say that it's a key and a first appearance, and they pay big bucks for it, and I'll find it for $1 or $2, and I'll just do it, right? Nth Man was an interesting read, but it was just not enough for me to keep it, if you will. And the fact that it sort of crossed over into Excalibur was kind of weird for me at the time. All right. This is another book. This is probably my third copy. I was finding Adam Hughes covers left and right, and I was like, hey, man, Josh, you want this? You want this? But with the Legion one, I kept this one. Dave Stevens, Adam Hughes books, the covers, anything that goes on. It blows my mind how people are snatching those up. And when I say blow my mind, that's not a negative. Uh, I just never would have thought, you know what I mean? As a Legion of Superheroes fan and this Legionnaires fan and things like that, just the fact that there's a hot Legion book, even though it's well, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's Bad Girl covers, Headlight covers, Bondage covers, Shark covers, Spread Eagle covers. There's always been niches that people would get. So Adam Hughes covers are what they are. But yeah, I'll grab some of these all day long, just because of that, right? And I tell you what, I'm feeling. I know it's getting very nostalgic, right? I remember the 70s as a kid. I kind of grew up into the 80s, and then I was in my 20s during the 90s. So I can distinctly, with my memory, feel the identity of each of those decades and stuff, right? And there's just a certain charm with the 80s. There really is. There's just a certain charm. Bronze Age comics are my favorite. But the 80s, I was there. I was grabbing them. A lot of history was made. A lot of validation came to them. And then there was things where when we got a licensed property, it was a licensed property, and they at least tried to give it a tone or match up with what it was, right? So the fact that some of these books that were for very young kids, Star Comics in particular, have, there's still an audience for them, and some of these are actually kind of pricey and stuff, right? But anyway, I'll grab a Thundercats and a Star Comics any day of the week when I see them. I know there are people on here, and I'll get Harvey Comics if I run across them. Little Monsters, Gold Key books and stuff. The one of the things about having a nice collection is the variety and stuff, right? But Pirates of Dark Water, I've got like the 8 issues of that. I think I had the whole set, hopefully, and things like that. But a lot of these really hold. I don't know. I hate to say nostalgia because I escape nostalgia quite a bit with these stuff, right? But sometimes it's just cool to have something that is a Thundercats, right? And as I've said, I was a G.I. Joe He-Man guy, but I appreciated the other lots. You know what I'm saying? Black Star when I was a kid. Of course, there was Star Wars, Return of the Jedi. Rich kids were the ones with the Transformers. I had a few GoBots. You know what I'm saying? So going with the epic line of comics here, that's Star from Marvel. If you didn't know, Star was a a line of comics from Marvel Comics where they specifically had licensed properties, maybe one or two original ones. They stuck Peter Porker in there, if you will, but they had Muppet Babies and stuff, and it was for the kiddies there, right? But then we had the Clive Barker thing, right? When Hellraiser came out, okay, that movie Hellraiser with by Clive Barker and stuff. This was horror, right? I was there, and yes, I was in high school as a teen and stuff. But when Hellraiser came out, this was horror, right? The people who like the Stephen King movies and they like Jason, the slasher movies, and Halloween. This was the one they were like, this is the scary stuff, right? So it had a mystique about it. Um, Hellraiser 2 is the one that grabbed me, the second one, the sequel. That's the one where I was like, oh, this is good. And Pinhead entered pop culture and stuff, right? But then, in 1990, I do believe, and I did see it in the theater, I may have finally gotten rid of the VHS tape. But we had Nightbreed, okay? Nightbreed was the one that did it. The first official band I was in. Uh, was interesting. There was three of us, and the guy that my mom introduced was stuck in like 1981. He still had the curly hair like he was in 38 Special, and a mustache, and a shirt that was 5 times too small because I think it was the same one he had. I can't remember what he wanted to name the band, but I turned him on to the Black Crows a little bit. We were playing some Black Crows and things. And I told him we needed another name, and for the life of me, all I could think was Nightbreed. And I'm like, oh God, don't be lame, Tim. And we went with Nightbreed. But anyway, the first 4 issues are a retelling of the movie, which the movie is directed by Clive Barker, which is a retelling of, I just went blank on the book. Uh, anyway, but yeah. So the comic book adaptation, epic line of comics came out with Clive Barker's Nightbreed. This ran for about 25 issues. I have a trade of the first 4 issues, the Magnolia cover. Boone was the name character. It'll come to me, right? And I always end up double dipping, right? For some reason, whenever I run across these Nightbreed books, I end up double dipping on the same issues, but that's fine because they're usually an upgrade. I've got a lot of Clive Barker stuff on this shelf. I keep it all handy where I can grab it. That would be right here, half of that shelf with Hellraiser anthology books, Clive Barker, the epic stuff, more or less. And there was another, I think Dynamite came out with another 12-issue miniseries in the 2000s, I think, of Nightbreed. I've got most of those and I haven't read those yet, right? But I think this is great. The Brett Blevins art, I think Pete Milligan, but this is number 4. That's an upgrade, if you will. So I now have 3 number 1s, and my number 1 is trash. The first one I had. It's nice and flat, but there's some printing issues on it. So when I saw 2 number 1s, I just went ahead and grabbed them, right? Okay. So yeah, Nightbreed, Clive Barker. Love it. Love it, right? Now, this issue, I believe this is 79. This is Superboy in the Legion of Superheroes, my friends, number 250. All right. So, Little Howler Mouse's first comic book that he bought with his own money was a Superboy and Legion of Superheroes book. I still have it down there, right? But this, somewhere laying around here, if I can find it, you can usually have it. This was a coverless copy in the house. Apparently, and it was stamped Wise County Library, Wise, Virginia. Wise, Virginia is about an hour away. Okay, on your way to Kentucky, right? And there's a library, and I actually ended up having, but the stepdad somehow got a hold of books from a library. Apparently, never took them back. So I have a coverless copy of this. Now, why am I going on and on about this, right? Well, first of all, there's a Legion trader in this. I don't know if you want me to spoil a 46-year-old book. I think that's what it was. Yeah, 1979. And it's very wild for me to see this with creamy colors. I don't know where, like I said, this comic book shop got his back issues, but they're in great shape. But if you look at this, right, you're going to see that it is story and layouts by Steve Apollo, words by Paul Levitz, right? Who was Steve Apollo? Well, there there was a lot of things going on at Marvel behind the scenes. If you know a one Jim Starlin, you know he did a Warlock series where he had clowns show up in the story, and the clowns were Lin Wein and Marv Wolfman for their editorial and the way they came after him. And there were some things that happened there to where Jim was like, "I'm out of here," as Jim will do, as we've heard over the years and stuff, right? Um, and somewhere along the line, I want to say it was Al Milgrom. And this would make sense because he was doing Firestorm at the time. But the way I heard it and remember it is that he called up Jim and he was like, "Hey, Jim, man, there's an opening on the Legion of Superheroes." So he comes over there. And Jim does not like people messing with his scripts and whatnot or whatever. He's an artist. The temperament, I've never really known if it's justified or not, or if he's taking a stand. A lot of a no take no shit attitude from the guy, right? It's kind of admirable. You know what I mean? So basically, they messed with the story, is what I heard. He wanted his name took off of it, and thus we have Steve Apollo, aka Jim Starlin pen name, right? I feel like he's used that before, and I also think he's had several other pen names, right? What we got up? Oh, Tat Comics is here. Good to see you. I wasn't rich and I had Transformers. Oh, my parents lied to me. At least I got a Nintendo around '87. I'm like, I'm happy with that. Might call if I ever talk to the parents again, I might be I'll be like, "What's up with the Transformers, man?" Hey, Howler Mouse, good to see you. JU, love Nightbreed movie. Haven't read the comic yet. I dug it. I mean, as you can see, but Cabal, the Sumerian. The book was Cabal. Thank you very much. See, I love how we're all in this together. I love how we're all in this together. Nothing like I've just accepted during live shows when I go blank. I'm not even embarrassed anymore because there's been many times that I've gotten off of a live show and within 30 minutes or when I lay down for bed, it all comes to me, everything I forgot. Gore Vidal, the film Hellraiser, was released around the same time Hellblazer came out. Been revisiting Delena's Foundation run. It's wonderful. Oh, okay. Foundational run. Yes. Yeah, haunting. I consider it haunting. I think we've talked before. I want to say I'm like maybe 25 issues from having the full 300 issue run, but I have all the Delaney stuff of Hellblazer. And I have a couple of trades up there up here just to be able to grab them. And I have all the Delano stuff. It really, when I read it, I was really underwhelmed, and then the stories would be in my head, and it was haunting. I was like, oh man, like there's definitely something there. They're fantastic, especially issue 11. Especially issue, I think issue 11, Newcastle. That's the story. Yeah. Jay Lucian, yo, right back to you, brother. Gore Vidal, I had that issue. Did not know that about Starlin. Yep. And that's a loose translation of a memory of a story. They might have. Yeah. Yes, Pat. I'm positive they did now. So yeah. All I wanted was that Megatron where it looked like a real weapon, if you will, right? And again, guys, right? I'm now 2 issues I think it's 2 issues from finally having this. This little mini series from the Epic line of comics, I'm not going to lie, started getting under my skin a little bit, right? But not for the reasons you think, right? Butch Geist. I absolutely loved Jackson Butch Geist. Absolutely love his work, right? And I've kept some issues of Micronauts just because that's where he came in on this, right? And then we had a Marvel graphic novel called Swords of the Swashbucklers. And it's like this sci fi story where it's got the theme of pirates, if you will, and stuff, right? And then that graphic novel, which was done by Butch Geist, and who was the other writer? Good grief. Yeah, Bill Mantlo, of course. How could I forget that, right? I thought it was great. It was the 80s. It was swashbuckling. It fit right in there. If you were like in the Indiana Jones things, that's, kind of how I remember, right? And then they came out with a 12-issue mini-series, maxi series, right? And I've had the same 4 issues forever, it feels like. Good thing I document these things on the channels. And That's the only 4 issues I've ever been able to find. When I did find them, Swords of the Swashbucklers in dollar boxes, it was the first 4. So imagine my surprise when I finally got to lay eyes on this. I have found all kinds of epic comics, epic line of comics out there, complete sets of Moonshadow, Black Dragon, no problems. But something about this, and Jeff Ursherwood ended up coming over and taking over the pencils after Butch Geist came out, right? So I finally am. I need 2 more issues so I can just put this to rest, right? But like I said, sci-fi pirates, you know. And I will say the Butch Guy's artwork is the hook for me. Not a lot to say about the story at this point, but it was fun. Speaking of Moonshadow, you know, good. That's also good stuff. But yeah. So thank goodness. I tell you what, I just absolutely love the Epic line of comics, especially with the advertisements and Archie Goodwin running these things. They're just fun comics, man. We got bug aliens. You know, uh, they had almost a full run of Alien Legion that I put behind that I wanted to get into. Electra Assassin, a lot of Bill Sienkiewicz. Paul Galassi doing 6 from Sirius, along 2 in the first one. The Boz Chronicles, I turned that down. That looked just too. I couldn't get into it. I actually flipped through the first issue of those dollar boxes. But Swords of Swashbucklers, right? 2 more issues, and I'm good to go on this. Pretty sure now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, around 2016, 17, or 18, I actually think 2 creators came on at Dynamite or something, and did a 6-issue miniseries years later after this story, but I probably won't try to track that down. Totally random, guys. I'm just remembering things as we're talking here. All right, what do we got here? Gorbadal, I have all 300, fortunately. Fantastic. Electra Geist is first rate. Yes, absolutely. I absolutely love his stuff. I follow him on Instagram, to get his stuff, right? So we're getting there, guys. We're getting there, right? Like I said, this is fun. This is stuff that I needed, wanted to read. It's so great, right? So I think it was about a month or 2 ago, maybe 2 months ago, that I talked about Josh. We have a few live streams, 3 live streams on this channel here. We took off to North Carolina and hit a McKay's, which is like a store where you can take books and video games and your action figures and your toys and stuff, and they'll give you store credit or buy it from you. If you get store credit, it's more, and all just rows and rows of bookshelves and records and cassettes and DVDs and collectibles and stuff. And I picked up this book. For some reason, I was just looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, that's one to get. Power Girl versus Supergirl, if you're into comics and into it. And then it made me remember out of the blue that I'm like, I'm missing 1 issue of something, right? And it's the Justice League of America crossover with JSA by James Robinson. This is the I want to say it's maybe volume 4 of Justice League of America. I'm not sure what volume it is, but this one started out with Brad Meltzer doing the first 12 issues. Then the Wayne McDuffie came in. Then I think Lynn Wein came in, right? And then they handed it to James Robinson. He did it from issue 37 or 38 up to the end of the book, I think around issue 60. And he was able to do some really different stuff in here with really different characters. He had Congarilla. He brought in the Blue Starman, Michael from Starman and DC first issue special, The Bronze Age and stuff, right? He played around with some things and did some things, and all because DC 52 was coming. We had Dick Grayson Batman. It started with Crime Justice, where he ended up having, I think it was Roy Harper's Prometheus ended up ripping off Roy Harper's arm at the shoulder. Things like that. There's some very brutal stuff going on there. The 7-issue miniseries. I don't know if I still have the trade or not. It's one of the few things by James Robinson I know I got rid of at some point. Maybe I got it back. I don't know. But anyway, he got on there and he did his run of Justice League. He's of Starman fame. Yes, I had to have it. I bought the Justice Society issues and this crossover and stuff. And as you can see, it's Supergirl versus Power Girl. This is also for you Ultimate Spider-Man fans and New Warriors fans and things like that. That Mark Bagley was at DC, and he was doing. I don't know if he did all of the run with James Robinson, but yeah, we got some Mark Bagley doing some DC characters. He also had Trinity with Kurt Busiek. So at least they were trying to put him on big projects, and like I said, he was a workhorse. But I never really felt he through his artwork. I never really felt comfortable like he was at DC. All right, guys. So what do we got here? What's left here? Right? Okay, we're going to be ending here with some Alan Moore stuff, guys. Yes, Alan Moore. Right. I think I am 4 issues from finally completing this. My white whale at right now. You know what I mean? My white whale. But it's the Eclipse run of Miracle Man. Okay, I'm very happy to have what I have. I do realize that Marvel, since what 2013 or 14, started putting out those Eclipse Alan Moore or the writer books of Miracle Man out. They dropped the ball a few times, recolored them, and then they finally got some momentum there with Mark Buckingham coming back and actually redrawing some of the issues. Because for now, now I think it was 93, but they had 24 issues come out through Eclipse, right? I think Alan Moore may have done the first 15 or 16. Neil Gaiman comes on, and it came out very sporadically, okay? It took quite a while to get those books out, right? And then all of a sudden, due to Eclipse shutting down and lawsuits over who owns what, and Mike Mignola coming in there, Todd McFarlane coming in there, and Neil Gaiman, who owns the rights and stuff. You know, some of us have actually been waiting now 32 years for that final story by Neil Gaiman to end. I thought it was just going to, a lot of us, including me, really thought it was just one more issue, like in issue 25. We know that one's done. We've been waiting on it and stuff, right? So they reprint all of the stories, all of the books. They came out with the hardback collection and trades. I have them right here, right here. It's kind of wild to read that and stuff. The mystique of Miracle Man grew over the years to where I sort of was afraid people would be underwhelmed by it after all the changes that happened in comics, kind of because of that book, realistic violence and things like that. And then, Gaiman gets in trouble. He does something stupid, and I feel, and his ex-wife, Amanda Palmer, is also up for what they did. Hopefully, that news. I talked about it a few months ago. And now I'm sitting here thinking it's funny that he was probably one more issue from completing the last Miracle Man story, the Silver Age story. They're not going to put it out. DC canceled the facsimile edition of Sandman #8 with the first appearance of Death. Oh God, Amazon ended quite a few things because of this with Neil Gaiman, and Marvel. I have not heard a peep. And I think the last issue of the new Miracle Man story, if you follow me, that some of us have been waiting on for decades, literally, not figuratively, literally. May never come out. I think that's hilarious. I'm sitting here like this book is cursed. I don't think I have another 30 years in me, guys, to wait for that last issue, Kind of wonder. So what am I talking about here, right? Well, I'm getting the complete Eclipse book of comics. Ironically, I have the most expensive book in the collection that I got for a great deal. And I had number two. I don't know what happened. Going off the top of my head, the first, I don't know. Let's go with four issues. Let's say the first four issues of the Eclipse Miracle Man was when it was Marvel Man in Warrior magazine. It was already there, and uh, Alan Moore becomes a big hit with Swamp Thing, a Superman story here and there, and they start bringing over more of his stuff over here, and then we get new material. Finally, eventually, and then I got burned because I got one issue of Miracle Man that I was like, oh, that's great. Maybe $1 or two more than I wanted to pay. And I find out that there's an editorial in the front of it. And it says, due to our offices being flooding, we're going to give you two Michelangelo stories from the 50s, reprints. There's one issue of this 24 issues that's nothing but reprints from the 50s because Captain Marvel comics were hit in England back in the 50s. The National Periodic, which was DC, and they were suing them, suing Captain Marvel and all that stuff because Captain Marvel was outselling Superman, and they were saying it was derivative of Superman and all this stuff. So there was no more reprints of Captain Marvel when it finally ended in the 50s. So Michelangelo comes out with Marvel Man, with the whole Marvel Man family, young Marvel Man, kid Marvel Man, and it's a complete rip. And it doesn't hide it. It's there's no shame in it of Captain Marvel. So when it comes to America, they had to change it to Miracle Man because Marvel Comics did not want it called Marvel Man. So basically, this is Captain Marvel. Okay, right? In the real world. Okay, in the real world. And it goes a few places. Okay, is everybody's eyes crossed after I just butchered that? I think you get the deal. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Cry for Justice is one of the few Robinson series I just couldn't love. That's from the Sumerian. Yeah, I couldn't either. There's something missing besides the complete brutality done to the heroes. It just didn't flow. I was like, is this? It felt like it was brutal to be brutal. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And James Robinson, I've got enough of his stuff that the guy can write. So yeah, maybe. And it wasn't unreal expectations put upon the writer. It just felt like it was just brutal to be brutal and stuff, right? Victor Shade, Miracle Man was groundbreaking at the time. I never read the gaming issues. Thought that the Moore run was incredible. The gaming issues, I was when I got the trade of the first gaming issues, and I had a few of the issues to begin with. They're very artsy. It's almost like here's what we can do in comics. I mean, there's a whole issue with cloned Andy Warhols. I mean, I don't even want to say they're weird. It's like I feel like somebody had their hand over their face like this, and they were pulling down their Tim Burton curly hair, if you will, and being like, "I'm an artist. We're going to make these comic books art." Then he got to a plot after he played around with it, Mount Olympus and all this stuff in there. He was sort of sprinkling in the new world that was being brought in after Moore's run. So yeah. Okay, for me, Alan Moore's final issue is the end. I'm that way now. I am that way now. Okay, with the Eclipse series and what was going on, but I cannot stand something not being finished. Okay, you know what I mean? I have no doubts in my mind that not only did Mark Buckingham come in and they said he redrew some of the gaming stuff and Gaiman was giving us new material, but the material from the past that we were supposed to see, there's no doubt in my mind that he touched that up and rewrote some of that for the modern audience. You know what I mean? A few things here and there, right? I don't know. But I just think it's just the irony. You know what I mean? The irony, right? So, for you guys that may not have been there, don't remember, or something like that, back in the 90s, people were sort of amazed that after Image Comics was started by the artist, and they immediately started seeing that artists sometimes do need writers, not just the art that sells the books and stuff, and the lateness and the quality of some of the things that Image was putting down. Um, well, let's just put it this way. I actually knew somebody in the year 2000, around the year 2000, who had a greenhouse, and they had taken long boxes of all the collectible books from Image, and they had decided to put them in the greenhouse to help keep the frost off the plants by stacking them up or whatever they did, right? So there was a glut of comics that came out, and they were late, and they had house style, depending on who it was. You had Youngblood, Bloodstrike, Death Blow, all kinds of stuff like that, right? And then McFarlane brought in Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Dave Sim to write some of the Spawn books, Neil Gaiman also. There we go. And Alan Moore actually ended up, turns out he was a fan of Image. They reminded Alan Moore of the music industry of the 60s where they were putting out pop records left and right. And he just loved this concept of how Image was putting out this glut of comics. They were just getting them out there, right? So he ended up sort of coming in and doing the 1963 sort of a retro Silver Age homage Marvel universe for the Image verse that never got the annual. It was never really finished. We won't get into what's the guy's name, Don Simpson, what he did to kind of finish it years later. And then Alan Moore ended up doing Wildcats. He did Violator, 3 issues of the Violator miniseries. He ended up doing Spawn and the Wildcats in a story where they met. I think the Wildcats went into the future. And so I have all this stuff. I just haven't read it forever. And one of the other books that he put out at the time was Voodoo. Okay, this was, let's say, 4 issues. I believe this was 4 issues, right? A 4-issue miniseries. So I grabbed number 1. The other 3 covers were done by Adam Hughes. You like how we bookended that? That's what I'm saying. We've sprinkled all these same creators to there, and we mentioned Adam Hughes, and we're back to Adam Hughes. Well, the last 3 issues are by Adam Hughes, right? I went ahead and I flipped through this first issue. Didn't read it completely, last night and stuff. And it's got that house style of Wildstorm, if that's what you want to go with for. It actually uses the N word on the first page, which blew my mind. I think they're in a bus stop or something, or a train station or something. And yeah, there is a black guy talking to another black guy or something. Let's take a look there. And Alan Moore dropped the N word. I don't recall Alan ever really doing that before. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm not offended, but I was just like, whoa, what am I reading here? Yeah. Yeah. For a minute there, I thought I was reading a little bit of Robert Crumb, a little bit, you know. But yeah, they're just like in a train station or a bus station, and he's talking to an older guy, and they're talking about, I'm not even sure what they're talking about. Is this the crossroads of the world? He ended up using this in top 10, I think, this idea here. Oh, where's it at? Huh. Oh, it's in here anywhere. But anyway, so that's the first issue of that. And then we have like this Art Deco. The next 3 issues are sort of Art Deco covers of Voodoo. Voodoo is with the Wildcat. She's half alien. I keep wanting to say they were called Damonites, but I think that was in ROM. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But she's the Wildcats were sent here from space, all right, because of this great war going on with these aliens. And kind of think Dances with Wolves, where Kevin Costner was, he was sent way out into the west with his little hut for whenever the army would come out. He was supposed to be there, he was by himself. And Alan Moore was great with what he did because the Wildcats were all set up to be ready to fight this war if it comes to Earth and all this stuff. And then Alan Moore took the whole concept of a Japanese soldier was left in the Pacific on an island. People found him in the 60s, and he'd been there since World War II, and he didn't know the war was over. Nobody ever told him, and that's kind of what he did with them, So Voodoo is a dancer, but come on, guys, she's a stripper, and they play with that concept in here with a plot. You get to see her audition, and there's polls in there and stuff, right? It's not quite skeevy, but we're going to kind of get there and stuff, right? So for $3, I got the miniseries complete in that first issue. If I run across the other issues with Adam, Hughes covers, I'll probably never won't do that. But there you go. But anyway, yeah, it seems like it's all about magic and stuff. You know, I think it's like the why does she call it voodoo? That's her stage name. For the girls and stuff, right? Yeah, here we go. Here's one of the Adam Hughes covers, and there should be two more. Yeah, and I've actually run across this one and just didn't get it. Yeah, she's got those man shoulders going on. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So yeah, that's what I got. I can kind of put to rest the Orion, um, which was very cool. Great to have those issues in Nevada because I've been curious about where Steve Gerber was going to go with this concept. Like I said, Steve Gerber back in the '70s, he didn't so much write stories as he wrote mind trips. You know what I mean? Like he would blow your mind. Some of his prose stuff in Man Thing, drawn by John Mishima, is like the image is embedded in my head for life. Where I read it so young. So yeah, Steve Gerber to me was not Valiant. Steve Gerber was Vertigo before there was Vertigo, in my opinion, on a lot of things, especially with an Iron Man annual with the Molecule Man possessing a little kid and Man Things popping up. Yeah, so as a kid, a lot of the Marvel stuff that pops up that's stuck in my head is from Gerber. There you go. All right. It could be worse, Tim. In a year or two, DC could have the book to Tom. Oh, if they gave Tom King that book to finish, I would just. I don't know. There are places in my brain that would pop, and there's no telling what would happen. Oh, found the first appearance of Rune yesterday. Rune is fantastic. Those Barry Windsor Smith issues, I dig them. The art alone carries it. I hope you can find the Conan Room crossover, the one shot that Barry Windsor Smith did. That thing is freaking beautiful. Yeah, it's an issue one of Sludge. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The flip cover where they ended up having a piece of the first Rune story as a backup feature in flip book of a bunch of Ultraverse books at the time, and then they would end up reprinting that one book. I don't know if it was in zero issue and stuff. And then Chris Alm and Barry Windsor Smith continued the story of Rune. Um, and then, like I said, they had a crossover. I feel like he also crossed over with Silver Surfer. But I dig Rune, even if it's just for the artwork and places and stuff, right? So, guys, I am very appreciative of everybody that has hung out here with me tonight on this wintry Friday night. I am so glad I got to show these books so I can get them put up or put to the side till I get some bags and I can start reading a few things. I mean, at the end of the day, let's face it, that's why I keep doing this, man. I just love reading this stuff, and then having some of the stuff I read as a kid. I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know if is it really a spoiler when it's 46 years ago who the traitor was. I mean, just all this rich history, all these things that I can finally, even if it's horrible, I'm just going to be glad to read it. And now Gore has me wanting to go to get my Phantom Zone out, one of the first miniseries from DC, back in the day, Steve Gerber and stuff. Need a Steve Gerber fix. Um, and then, underappreciated books that were highly influential, you know, just having this variety of stuff to check out and to read and look at, and these little gems out there. It's gonna be great. But yeah, first thing I want to get through and read, just so I can put it to rest, is the Orion, Nevada and Orion. That's probably the way I'm going to go with this. It's kind of funny, man. I'm not putting Alan Moore on the top of the stack. Isn't that wild? Okay. Hey, it's an issue one of Sludge. He did. I have that last issue of Surfer, Rune the Surfer. Great. Darth Vader is Luke's dad in Wally Wood. That's right, man. Yeah. Yeah. So watch it on the rewind. I appreciate everybody coming out. I appreciate everybody with the comments. I'm very appreciative being told that the book that Nightbreed was based on was Cabal. And I should have known that because it just popped in my head. If you go on YouTube and you look up the Cabal cut, there is a fandom who have re-edited the movie and inserted deleted scenes and everything they could find, and it ends up being 3 hours. And I just realized that I've had it in my watch list for probably like 6 months and keep meaning to get to watch it. Strangely enough, I really don't have 3 hours that I want to sit down and watch something. I always have something going on, and I'm lucky to sit down and just do videos and live shows sometimes and stuff, right? So, yeah, if you're a Nightbreed fan, Clive Barker fan, and you want to see something like that, like I said, there's a Cabal cut in 3 to 3.5 hours long, and it's on YouTube. It just blows my mind what's on there. Also, if you're into free movies and stuff, Hateful Eight is probably up. Uh, Dogma by Kevin Smith is on YouTube for free. Apparently, anything that is Miramax and Harvey Weinstein, apparently people, what I have been told is that nobody wants to, YouTube doesn't give a shit. The guy was a piece of shit. So they have decided that if somebody uploads a Miramax movie, they're not going to take it down. So you can, yeah, see all that for free. I don't know where I went with that. I don't, Nightbreed is not Miramax, so I don't know where that went. Yep. Bronze Era comics are easily rereadable, and may the booster gold be with you. Oh man, the booster gold love, the Tom King love. It's amazing how those two things just I can't let it go. It's great. All right, guys. Gore, give me a yell if you want to do a show. Anybody who wants to pop on here with me at some time, go on Instagram, give me a yell. I'm actually going to have some time this weekend. So yeah, man, great to see everybody. Read your comics, enjoy the smell of the old comics, and be excellent to each other, guys. And make sure you thumb this video up now or in the future. Make sure you check out all the people here in the chat. Make sure you've subscribed here, hit the bell, and be excellent to each other, guys. Everybody have a great weekend.